Hello everybody, Mark Schaftlein with you, and this is the Schaftlein Report. We're going to cover everything. We're going to cut through all the propaganda, give it to you straight from left, right, and center. The opinions are what counts. Hello everybody, Mark Schaftlein with you, and this is the Schaftlein Report. Folks, we're going to give you some mixed commentary today. We're going to talk about the disaster that is the Democratic Party. But we're also, and we talked about this a little bit last week, we're going to flash some warning signs for the Republican Party. And again, we strongly advocated some mid-course corrections last week. I'll tell you what, it's really amazing to me. The things that Donald Trump said he was going to do when he ran for office, he's doing. Now, some of them, again, we're going to get into maybe a little more aggressive than people anticipated. But let's break down the events that have occurred since we issued, sort of a call to arms last week. You had what I call the first Democratic primary. And you know what I'm talking about. It's not New Hampshire. It's not this, renewed change the way they do it now. No, it was the Munich primary. You said, Mark, I didn't know there was a primary in Munich. Listen, Gavin Newsom made an absolute fool of himself there. People talk about how much AOC flat on her face. Newsom was just as bad. This going to a foreign conference by opposing politicians, some of which may run for president, is a national embarrassment. Now, can they go? Of course they can go. They're invited to go. But Newsom going over there and simply bashing Trump, and AOC completely out of her lane. I mean, folks, if you thought the word salad from Kamala Harris was bad, get a load of her 29-39-second answer when asked about Taiwan. I mean, from bartender to House of Representatives, that's a great accomplishment. We're not taking anything away from her. Whether you like her district or loathe her district, she's among the most well-known representatives in the country. And it does appear she may take a shot at the presidency. But boy, that was an embarrassment over there. And on the other hand, Marco Rubio, the existing Secretary of State, former United States Senator from my home state of Florida, and potentially could go down as one of the greatest Secretary of States ever. That speech he gave in Munich was interrupted multiple times with applause. He is being widely accredited for not only stipulating the U.S. position of Donald Trump, but also bringing the Europeans together, letting them know that, we're not abandoning them. We're still partners with them, but the world has changed and there's going to need to be changes. I mean, I've seen Senator Rubio, now Secretary of State Rubio, a long time, followed his career. That was as good as it gets, folks. So again, you have the Secretary of State widely praised from all aspects of the political spectrum, particularly from the Europeans. And Newsom and AOC, it was embarrassing. And you know what? I think the best thing is some of these Democrats have stayed away. I mean, I know it's sort of a tradition now that party out of power, particularly Democrats, do this, but boy, I don't think either one of those two potential candidates did themselves, any favor. Now, these policies that they have are potentially, Trump wasn't standing in the way, would be devastating to the country. Let's take a look at where we are right now. The Iran nuclear deal, that thing is being negotiated as we speak. Now, I'm seeing various reports out of the press that are somewhat optimistic. I, for one, am not. I don't trust the Iranians. That Islamic regime killed upwards of 30,000 of its own citizens. We don't even know the final number. Any leadership group that will go into hospitals and murder injured civilians, you can't trust them. Look what happened after we had the success with the Israelis last year. I just don't see Khamenei giving on this piece. And I think that Trump's resolve in this matter has positioned the U.S., if they are not successful, they're, I believe, taking Trump at his word, as he has from the time he was inaugurated, it is not going to shock me to see military action. Now, for right now, the US dollar is rallying. There's a belief that, we could get a deal. And I don't want to advocate folks, when they're talking, it's not good, because it certainly is. But do not ever trust the Iranians, their leadership. I'm not talking about the people. The people of Iran are generally oppressed, ridiculously oppressed. And if an organization will take live bullets with machine guns and kill protesters, you think they're going to honor a nuclear deal? I don't think so. I'm not trying to pour cold water on it, but I do not trust them. And I do not think that a deal is at hand. I don't even think we're close to a deal. And when Trump came out and said we're going to support the protesters, that's put us in a somewhat challenging situation. Bear in mind, when Trump campaigned, he didn't campaign on, launching attacks on Iran. Now, the initial nuclear strike, widely supported. I'm not so certain this one that is, though. But again, to keep the word of the United States, and Trump has laid down an ultimatum, I do expect that negotiations will continue. But if Trump gets to a point where he's not satisfied, those two aircraft carriers groups that are close to Iran aren't there by accident, folks. Now, similarly, although maybe a better tone are the Russia-Ukraine negotiations. Look, folks, we've mentioned this on the show going back a long time. The Russians are losing 1,000 soldiers a day, either killed or wounded. 6,000 Koreans were killed there. Numerous fighters from different African countries are there. And again, these losses are just staggering. They're the most losses any military in the world has seen since World War II. The Russian hierarchy does not care about losing soldiers. They do not value life. We can only hope that some of the progress that's been reported continues. Russia, as we mentioned last week, spending half its economy on this war. But again, two foreign policy issues going on. But folks, they're not making sort of the headlines. They're there. They're out in the news, all right. But they're not like grabbing your attention. The death is horrific in both of them, the Iranian situation and what's going on with Russia, Ukraine. There were reports, earlier today about Ukraine taking back some territory from the Russians. This thing has been going on 4 years, folks. I can assure you, had Trump been president then, it never would have happened. But we're never going to know that. We're never going to see that. All right, so we've covered some international pieces. We talked about Munich. We talked about the Iranians. You're familiar with this. Let's talk about some of the foolish, and when I say foolish, folks, you cannot make this up. The Democratic Party went out of their way to defund the Transportation Safety Administration, TSA. And you're saying, well, why? Why would they do such a foolish thing? Well, they were trying to negotiate with the president over things that ICE is doing, Immigration Customs Enforcement. Albeit, folks, we'll get to this later in the show, that is a weak issue for the president right now. But what these foolish Democrats did, ICE was funded in the big, beautiful bill for 3 years. So it's not affecting ICE operations. What is it affecting? The Coast Guard. Well, we need the Coast Guard. It's affecting air traffic controllers, TSA, security when you go through airports. And it's also affecting FEMA if we had an emergency. Why? Why would the Democrats do that? Because they're trying to keep this issue in focus. Because as polling has shown, what used to be a winning issue for the president he's upside down on about 20 points, folks. So the Democrats, in their infinite wisdom, folks, when they orchestrated this shutdown, their whole idea was, well, we need to, rein in ICE. We need all kind of reforms. Well, guess what? The DSH oversight group that was overseeing ICE got their funding cut. So any investigations, oversight stopped. Leave it to the Democrats to do something so stupid that it would shoot him in the foot. That's exactly what happened, folks. ICE is still operating normal. The people affected are the ICE oversight. And as I mentioned, the Coast Guard, TSA, airport security, getting people through. And God forbid we have a disaster, FEMA. I mean, this is how the Democrats, they have nothing else to stop Trump. Trump derangement syndrome is so high. This is what they resort to. They'll eventually get this thing worked out. But the people that work, or they got paid before they went out. Certainly that was good. I think this thing's going to last minimum of 20 days, maybe pushing on 3.5, 4 weeks. We'll see. Only when the Democrats represent their foolishness will this thing come back around. All right, now, you just never know with them, though. It's just really crazy. All right, so another thing that, thank God the Democrats are not in power. We have the SAVE Act. Now, that is the voter ID piece that is, folks, rarely do you get 80% of Americans agreeing on anything. I hardly ever remember. But right now, the approval of having photo IDs, it's approaching 78 to 80%. Like high 90 of Republican, high 70s Democrat, about 80 of independents. And yet the Democratic Party will not allow this bill to advance in the Senate. Why? Because the radical left-wing base opposes this. And that's where the energy of the party is. I mean, you know what it may come down to? The Republicans may have to do what's called, force the Democrats into what's called a talking filibuster. Standing, talking. You have to have 60 votes to forward a bill in the Senate. Well, they got it on the floor with 53, but only John Fetterman voted with the Republicans. He's smart, okay? The rest of these Democrats, don't tell me about moderate Democrats. They're all falling behind Schumer on this one. They do not want voter ID. They do not want it. They don't want people verifying their ID to vote. And yet 80% of the American people want this. So the difference is on a standing filibuster, they're literally going to have to get up, stand up, and talk. And folks, this could go on for weeks. Will it grind all the other Senate business to a halt? Yes. So it's going to depend. How much does John Thune want to push this? How much does the president want to push it? It's a signature issue, again, just like Big Beautiful Bill. And Trump rightly believes that election integrity is a critical issue, as do a lot of Republicans and his base. I think this is going to happen. And will the Democrats cave on it? I don't know. They haven't showed any signs of it. But think about this. They're on the opposite side of an issue 80% of the American people support. Why? Well, obviously fraud's the answer, but the other answer is the illegal immigrants still in this country. Democratic leadership likes it when they get driver's license. Folks, a driver's license is one step away from getting a voter registration. There's a lot of illegals that have driver's licenses. So think about this. They're opposite 80% of the American public. You cannot make this up, folks. To call them a donkey's ass would be a compliment for them. They're opposed to something 80% of Americans are for. And these dimwits in leadership go out, stop funding of a group that oversees ICE. You can't make it up. It's unbelievable. Look, U.S. is continuing their attack on the drug boats. Okay, killed 11 people, 3 more boats destroyed. That's going to continue. I don't see any abatement here, folks. None whatsoever. The U.S. is continuing to push safety in our cities. Crime is way down across the country. And frankly, ICE is doing a damn good job. But we're going to get on the other side of it. There are some warning signs. And my conservative friends may not want to hear this, but I'm going to get into them because these are not yellow lights, folks. These are flashing red lights. All right, we're going to take a 30-second break. When we come back, we're going to get into the rest of the issues, the politics. We're going to cover some horrific stories too, folks. Back in 30.
AI is everywhere, but none of it does everything. Until now, meet Real Intelligence, RI, the one AI that does it all better. It generates cinema-quality 4K videos, unreal images, and award-worthy music, all in one platform. RI even writes code and handles advanced research at your command. No more juggling multiple apps or settling for less. Your creativity deserves one powerhouse. Real Intelligence, better at everything, all in one place. Try RI now for free at tryrinow.com.
Yeah, and we're back, folks. And a little plug for RI. They do an excellent job. We use them for our artificial intelligence. So take a look at it. They're really, really good company. All right, look, I told you got some bad news coming up. Well, we sure did. Folks, have you ever noticed another transgender massacre up in the Northeast? Folks, we have two genders. There's men and there's women. And doesn't it seem to you like an inordinate amount of these transgender people, they just go crazy? This one even, as my friend, J.D. Rucker said, they sent a notice to Kevin Sorbo about it. Don't get upset when trans people go crazy. He highlighted on Patriot yesterday. Again, this is horrific. The wife, the son, relatives killed, grandparents in critical condition. Folks, there is something wrong when you have this process of, quote, transitioning. I'm not going to speak any more about it because to me it's disgusting. We have men, we have women, we have straight, we have gay, no problem at all. But this trans stuff, how the hell this got to this level, I don't know. But boy, there is an inordinate high percentage of these people that cannot handle it, and they end up killing themselves and murdering other people, killing other people. It's disproportionately way out of control. And, we were talking about other things happen. You had another incident the other day where, a teacher in Savannah, Georgia, some guy from ICE in the country illegally, sees ICE coming after him, grabs a car, hits a teacher, kills her. And now what should have been a routine, apprehension turns into a death. I mean, folks, the Trump administration, I'm going to talk about this now. When they campaigned on getting rid of the worst of the worst. That's happening. I mean, we've talked about the statistics. I'm not going to bore you with that. But I think they did a good job when Tom Homan came to Minnesota and they made some corrections. I think they're going to, again, Trump and Homan have said, we're going to continue to enforce immigration laws. I don't think anyone's against that, but it's no coincidence, folks, that when these actions happen in Minnesota, the president's approval ratings on these issues decline. Not that he's taken the bad hombres. People are fully supportive of that. Not that he's going after people with criminal records. But here's where the support broke down. He still has 50% support among men, on the immigration piece. But folks, he's upside down. Only 38% of overall Americans approval the tactics of ICE and what's happening here. So they have made some mid-course corrections. Women only support him 35%. That's where the difference is. They're losing the women supporters. They've got the men, but those figures on both genders, folks, used to be much higher. This was a signature issue. People are really happy with what the president did at the border, sealing it, getting the, quote, bad hombres off the street. People are for that. But they don't want to see illegal immigrants, particularly young ones, people doing a service, not bothering anybody, no criminal record. That may be part of it because he did promise mass deportations. But hopefully, with Tom Homan leading the way and some of these tactics changing, he can regain that approval. Because, folks, when you combine everything, look, economically, we talked about this last week, unemployment 4.3%, jobs being created, interest rates coming down. The 10-year was hovering around 4%. Stock market near an all-time high. But again, the issue's out there. Price is high. So when you take a combination of Trump derangement syndrome, some economic pain, we talked about the debt that a lot of Americans have, and then you couple that with women losing support over these enforcement things on ICE, that's why the president's ratings have come solidly underwater. Now, again, we've had groups, we've talked about this, like Scott Rasmussen's group, a week ago, they were polling 43, 44. Now it's up to 46. That's better. It's not a comfort level, though. Again, Barack Obama, George Bush, they had ratings 42, 43, 44, and they got shellacked in the midterms. We don't want to have that happen, folks. But it is. And we have to be cognizant of what really is happening out there. Yes, the president may have upticked. And again, Rasmussen and Insider Advantage were the two most accurate pollsters in the 2024 election. When a lot of other people said, oh, no, Trump's not going to win the swing states, and they called them all. And they came within percentage points of being accurate on the final number. So I respect both those polling outfits. But aggregately, when some of these legacy media polling outfits come together, and there's 4, 5, 6 of them, and those numbers are all there, and they're not that far, when I see how upside down on some of these issues, illegal immigration, ICE, economy, factor in Democrats will walk over broken glass to get to the polls, we got an issue, and we got to address it. And I think the administration is taking steps, okay? But there has to be more of it. Keep communicating. Keep talking about the successes. So, he is upside down in a lot of those key issues. So don't sit here and think this is going to be easy. It's not. And folks, this is not yellow flag warning. This is red flag warning. The Trump administration's got some really sharp people in it. Let's utilize those people. Let's do the things that the American people want done. Economically, some good things are starting to happen. Gas prices are down. Some egg prices way down. But we have other things that aren't. So keep focusing on the economy. All right. Now, one thing else on the economy I want to tell you about. With this mass deportation policy and the illegals that have self-deported, and then the ones that we have deported, I'm telling you, we've seen, according to Goldman Sachs, an 80% reduction in immigrant employment dating back now 20 years. So, folks, when I see smaller jobs report, that doesn't really scare me because there's more jobs going to Americans because a lot of the illegal immigrants that had jobs that are no longer in the country, by definition, they have to be picked up. So keep that in mind as these numbers come out. But we did get last week a good inflation number. When we did the show last time, inflation was hovering 2.7 on an annual basis. It's now down to 2.4. The Fed's stated goal is 2. And with Kevin Warsh hopefully be confirmed by the Senate coming up this summer, there is a likelihood we are going to see further reductions. Wall Street pricing in 2 more cuts. This is important because, folks, when people go to the polls in October and November, we need to have the economy solidly on an uptick because the left, the Trump derangement syndrome, the independents that have soured, it's going to be tough to swing those people back no matter what the economic situation. But we have to keep focused on that. Now, a couple of things I want to talk about. We mentioned Goldman Sachs. They ditched their DEI policies, diversity, equity, inclusion, as has a lot of major employers. Why? It didn't work. That's why they did it. Okay. So good for Goldman, good for other firms that have done that. There is so much demand. Look, you hear all the stories out there. AI is going to crush this. AI is going to crush that. That could happen on a lot of white collar jobs. But it's not happening on blue collar jobs. And it's not happening on jobs where, people that were in the country illegally had those jobs. Somebody's got to fill them. That's why your unemployment rate's sitting at 4.3%. So if wages can continue to tick up, which I think they can, and inflation can come down, we could thread the needle as we head into these midterms. All right, so a couple other things I want to talk about here. The Guthrie case, what that family is going through. And again, it's like the lead news story all the time. Why? Because all of us can relate to our mother. I mean, an 84-year-old mother should not be kidnapped, abducted. And, they've done it. I commend the local police, the FBI, the resources being devoted to that. They're doing their best. But again, you don't know whether this is some psychopath out there or a robbery gone wrong. What? I mean, they're doing the best they can, and the best we can do on this show and other Americans is support their efforts and say prayer for what the Guthrie family is going through. It is brutal, and we hope this has a successful outcome. But right now, doesn't looks a little like the investigation is limited progress. Well, we hope that changes. And a couple other things, before I get into a couple closing pieces here. This was the 5-year anniversary of Rush Limbaugh passing away. And Rush Limbaugh, as Donald Trump acknowledged, Trump didn't really know him that well until Limbaugh endorsed him in the 2016 race. And Rush was incredibly popular, had 20 million listeners, the EIB network. I grew up listening to it for decades. And he helped mold a lot of the conservative, what we see today. And he was a big supporter of the president's up until his death 5 years ago. So I want to give a shout out to the king of talk radio, the former king, Rush Limbaugh, on his 5th year anniversary. And we also want to support 2 other great Americans. Reverend Jesse Jackson passed away the other day. He was 84 years old. Some people disagreed adamantly with what he did, but he was a hero to a lot of people. He was a civil rights icon. He was with Martin Luther King at that fateful Memphis day when King was shot. But Jackson persevered, ran for president twice. And folks, we have a way while we may disagree with people, we do want to acknowledge that particular in Reverend Jackson's case, he had a huge impact on the political fortunes in this country, particularly on the Democratic Party, changing the proportionate rules, winner take all rules, that helped Barack Obama get elected. So again, we respectfully say our best, for the loss of Reverend Jesse Jackson. And again, whether we agree or disagree, he was a giant in the Democratic Party and American political figure. And then on the theatrical side, Robert Duvall, famous for The Godfather, for Apocalypse Now, 95 years old, lost him. Great actor. So again, lots of things, happening, but we do want to pay our respects, to Rush on 5 years, Reverend Jackson and Duvall. And, we just hope that the country can continue moving forward. We have to get past this derangement syndrome stuff, though, folks. I think it is not helping the country. And God, we just had a situation the other day, 18-year-old kid, heavily armed, going to the Capitol. Fortunately, he was detained by police and nothing happened. Imagine that, 18 years old, he's trying to storm the Capitol, heavily weaponized. I mean, folks, and again, the threats to our lawmakers, forget whether it's a Democrat or Republican, the FBI has documented close to 5,000 threats against lawmakers. Folks, when I say the Democratic Party needs to tone down this rhetoric some and stop this just hateful anti-Trump, I mean it. I mean, violence is a fact of life in this country, but it does not need to be fanned by the flames of Trump derangement, sentiment, sheer hatred. I mean, once these people get this in their mind, ICE could be apprehending murderers, rapists, and they don't care. They see ICE as this negative force instead of stepping back and say, wait a minute, it's good that they're getting murderers, rapists, violent offenders out of the country. Anything ICE becomes negative to them. I hope something can be done to change that, because, that is not something that we need to see. So we talked about a lot of things. One final piece I'm going to share with you, folks. State of the Union next week. I'm hearing rumblings already that certain Democrats, left-wing radicals, of course, are talking about boycotts, walking out on the speech. Folks, the State of the Union, yeah, there could be disagreements. But let's all remember, we're Americans. And these Democrats that are fueling this hatred of Trump, the idea of walking out, of boycotting, of trying to demonize the president, that's got to stop. So, again, thanks everybody for watching Schaftlein Report, Patriot TV. We'll be back later this week, and as always, we're going to give it to you straight, good, bad, and indifferent. Thanks for viewing. See you in a couple days.
Sadie, why don't more people know about the health benefits of Glucodown soluble fiber? That it lowers blood sugar, especially after meals?
Glucodown drink mixes are enriched with soluble fiber for healthy blood sugar. It's diabetic-friendly nutrition, and it's clinically proven.
Glucodown's clinically proven soluble fiber helps maintain blood sugar in a healthy range, especially after meals.
Glucodown is a game changer.
Keep your blood sugar healthy. Try all 8 flavors of Glucodown.
Available at Amazon or in the diabetic care aisle at your local pharmacy.